If you're someone who struggles with loneliness or has a hard time being alone, then watch this video through to the end, and I promise that you will never look at being alone the same way again. I spend a lot of time alone, and in this video I want to talk about my relationship with loneliness and how it's evolved over the years to become not only one of the things that I most cherish, but one of the things that I most draw power from. One of my favorite things to do at night is to look out my window. I love the stark contrast of light versus darkness. Thousands of tiny lights. What an interesting sensation to realize that every single one of them represents life in some shape or form. I look out to the apartment building across the way, and in one apartment I can see kids and puppies running back and forth while the adults hang out in the living room, just sitting around in a circle of chairs, just talking. I love that about Colombia. In another apartment, I can see the lights of the TV dancing off the face of a woman frantically pedaling away on an exercise bike. She's been pedaling away like this every single night, and that belly doesn't look like it's getting any smaller. Then a few floors down, I catch the faint glow of a cigarette pole. Someone's on their balcony, alone in darkness, staring out into the distance, and I wonder what they're thinking. I really enjoy the exercise of observing my own loneliness within the greater context of those around me. I don't really have social friends, and it's been years since it was a normal thing for me to go out. Entire days spent working towards my goals, and then I go to sleep and I just repeat the same process over and over. Almost a decade of existing this way, which I think is a significant amount of time to be able to positively conclude that the more that I embrace these long periods of being alone, the more that I'm able to thrive in my personal and professional life. But it hasn't always been this way. There were a few periods in my life that were characterized by overwhelming loneliness, and understanding those periods has been invaluable to my journey. When I was 13 years old, puberty hit me really hard. My face was completely covered in acne. Nobody wanted to be my friend, and even people that were previously my friends were now embarrassed to be seen talking to me. It's one thing to feel alone when nobody's around, but it's entirely another thing to feel alone within a large group of people. Every day felt infinite. During lunch period, because I didn't have a table to sit at, I would buy my lunch, and then when nobody was looking, I would just go to the bathroom and I would sit in a stall until the bell rang to signal the next period. And this was before cell phones, so I didn't have a digital means through which I could escape my miserable reality. It was just me alone in that bathroom stall, counting down the seconds to the next period, afraid to death that at any moment someone would discover what I was doing every day. Thankfully, as it turns out, other people didn't really care about what I was doing as much as I thought that they did. So when the infinite school day was finally over, I would literally run home where my real social life was waiting for me in the form of role-playing video games. First was Chrono Trigger, then Final Fantasy VII, and then Xenogears. My only real social interactions during this entire period of my life was with the characters in these games, and I fully credit them for shaping me into the person that I am today. They helped me to understand the importance of hard work and discipline in achieving difficult goals, how hard work and discipline were what made difficult goals even worth it in the first place. They taught me about honor, courage, loyalty, trust, and even love. They gave me strong archetypes and reasons for wanting to strive towards embodying them. The hero, the dreamer, the martyr, the mentor. I would go to sleep every night feeling like I was still in the worlds from those games, but every morning it was back to school, back to the infinite reality of being alone within a large group of people. I remember one day as I sat there on a toilet bowl eating my lunch, I decided that I should try to figure out exactly why I was such a loser. I mean, yeah, I was extremely ugly, but there were other kids that were at least as ugly as I was, so why was it that even they avoided me? It wasn't until many years later that I realized that I could actually be my own friend. I could be my best friend. So fast forward a bit to March 2nd, 2011. I was now 26 years old. It was close to midnight. I was on the roof of my apartment building where I lived in Brooklyn, New York. I was staring out onto the New York City skyline, which has a really funny way of either making you feel like you're on top of the world or making you feel like you're being crushed under it. I was in the middle of a massive depression, and while during the daytime I was somewhat able to distract myself with TV shows and internet browsing, there was something about being alone at night that just felt unbearable. Just a few weeks earlier, a girl that I thought was the love of my life had left me to go back to a man that was far better than I was. And so standing alone on that roof, pulling on a cigarette, feeling more alone and depressed than I had ever been, I had an epiphany. And so what exactly happened in that moment I'll talk about in another video, but when I went back to my apartment, I was a completely different person than from when I had left it. I spent the next year and 2 months in almost complete isolation. I began to immerse myself in books. I would read and then I would apply. For the first time in my life, I had both the desire to discover who I could be and the motivation to bring that version of myself into reality. I decided that in roughly a year's time, I would compete in an Ironman. And I went from someone who has never run more than a few blocks to training up to 7 hours per day. Every morning at 5 a.m., before everyone else had a fair chance to wake up, with absolutely zero hesitation, I would literally spring up from my nice, warm, cozy bed and sprint over 5 blocks to a public pool where I would throw myself into freezing cold water to start my swim training. I did all my run training at night so that I could be alone. Cold New York nights that took me over the Brooklyn Bridge into Manhattan and then back over the Williamsburg Bridge into Brooklyn. Every day was me alone versus myself. And for the first time in my life, not only was I conscious of this battle, I was actually winning it every single day. On the weekends, long 7-hour bike rides that took me deep into New Jersey. And every minute of those 7 hours, I was pushing myself. They say that most long distance competitions aren't so much about endurance as they are about just managing pain, and I completely agree. I trained in complete solitude for a year and 2 months, and for as good as a writer as I hope to become, I don't think I will ever find the right combination of words to properly communicate just how magical this period of my life was. When I wasn't training, I was working on my skills as a website designer, where I went from working for free, or a measly few $100, building good websites that took me months to build, to getting paid thousands of dollars to build incredible websites that took me a fraction of the time to build. Working to improve myself in an environment where I was completely isolated, completely alone, allowed me to feel present at all times. Why had I feared being alone for so many years? I believe that hidden under the mask of what society wants us to believe that we are, that we each have a unique essence. And it's in solitude where my true essence thrives. Before my epiphany, I saw loneliness as something that I ought to avoid at all costs. This was the perception of a slave to a system designed to maximize profit at all costs. If we are programmed to fear being alone, it reduces the risk that we may go inside of ourselves and discover who we really are. The risk that we may come to know ourselves on a profound level. And just imagine for a second what would happen to this system if everyone came to truly know themselves. If we all suddenly realized that we didn't need products or pills to fix all of our problems, if we all suddenly realize that our programmed worship of material things is literally the thing that makes us unhappy, if we all suddenly realize that being alone for a while isn't just okay, it's necessary. These days, if I'm alone eating a meal or alone in the bathroom and I suddenly instinctively find myself pulling out my phone so that I can watch something on YouTube or scroll through Instagram so that I can remove the feeling of being alone, I'm able to quickly identify that these temptations are the tentacles of a system, a false reality, like desperately trying to pull me back in. In many ways, the simple act of existing within this system, as we all do, is like a progressively worsening disease. Browsing the internet, watching Netflix, even just talking to friends, this is all part of this closed loop of the system. And the more time that we spend not alone, the more deeply we become infected. Being alone is okay. Being alone is the cure. This is a huge benefit of meditation. Meditation for me is the realization that there is only the now, and in this now I am not alone, because in this now I am present with myself. When I sit down to meditate, I essentially am going to the meditation. But when I'm alone at 3 in the morning, writing words like the ones like you're presently listening to right now, the meditation comes to me. When I'm alone staring out my window at all of the thousands of lights and realizing that each one of them represents individual life with its own unique experience, its own unique essence, I realize that I'm never alone. Some of you watching this may perceive this as sad or depressing, but if you spent more time alone, perhaps you'd realize that you're really just looking into yourself. In a world and a life that has become so overwhelmingly noisy, silence now passes over me like a cool, relaxing breeze. I love being alone.